Hi, everybody. So this week we are talking about stress, and honestly, I think that's probably very appropriate based on what is going on in our world. I don't know how you guys are dealing with it, but last week, honestly, I was so ready for last week to be over with because it was just the stress of not knowing, like, as far as the school went, when are they going to pull the trigger on putting you guys online? Like, we knew it was going in that direction, but nobody was giving us a clear indication of when. And so I had that going on. I had my kid at his college and trying to figure out when are they going to close down his school and get him home. My husband and other son at their high school. Again, just all the unknowns, and we continue to live with a bunch of unknowns, don't we? Like, are they going to put us all on lockdown? How long is that going to be? What's going to happen to my job? Again, there's just a lot of stressors out there. And so I think this is a great time to be talking about stress. Now, I'm going to just give you a warning. We are going to talk about how stress can affect your health, especially prolonged stress. But I'm also going to give you some tools at the end of how to maybe cope better with stress. Because here's the deal. We can't avoid stress. It happens. It's just part of life. I wish we could, but unfortunately, that is not a possibility. So we're going to start looking at stress and stressors, and our stress response system. So get ready and go. So what is stress? Stress is the process by which we perceive and respond to certain events called stressors that we appraise as either threatening or challenging. And really, it is the process of perceiving and responding, or the response is called a stress reaction. So what might be stressful for one person might actually not be perceived as being stressful to another. Example, again, using this week. I took a class before, like a couple of years ago, on how to teach online. So that process does not really stress me out because I know about the tools that I have to do that with. I've been educated on those tools. However, my son has a teacher he's kind of an elderly gentleman, and he does not know how to do any of this. And so for me, this part of it doesn't seem that stressful. For him, I'm guessing he is completely overwhelmed right now trying to figure out how to make this work. It is all about our perceptions. Stress can either be adaptive, like when it causes us to run away and to be safe. So, you're walking through the forest, you're chilling, you're looking at all the pretty stuff in the nature, and all of a sudden, roar, there's a bear that comes out of nowhere. Okay, so in that moment, you become stressed, right? You have your fight or flight response kicks in, and what does it do? Well, it actually takes care of you. It helps you run away, and it saves your life. But stress can also be maladaptive. If it's a long-term stress, what we call chronic stress, it actually increases the risk of illness and health problems. This is kind of a fun little, not fun, it's an interesting little graph, that prolonged stress together with unhealthy behaviors, and that's kind of what goes hand in hand. What do we do when we're stressed? Well, we tend to do more unhealthy behaviors. So it can increase our risk for today's 4 leading diseases that are actually the cause of death. Heart disease. Well, stress, we know, the more you take on, it's affecting your heart. It may be affecting your blood pressure, hypertension, all that fun stuff. And so heart disease. I know some of you look at that and go, well, cancer, how is it? Stress does not cause cancer. Well, it does is it lowers your immune system. Here's the deal. You all have cancer cells in your body already, because what cancer cells are, they're just mutated cells. But our body fights those off and destroys them. Our white blood cells kick in, and so we keep all of that in balance. When your immune system goes down, though, those white blood cells basically are not strong enough, and so it can allow cancer cells to grow more rapidly than your body can fight them off. So that is one way that stress can not help the cancer situation. Strokes, again, high blood pressure. If you are chronically stressed, that can be a very bad thing. And then chronic lung disease. Well, if you know any smokers out there, or maybe you are you are a smoker, you know that when people get stressed, what do they want to do more of? Let me smoke more, right? And of course, that increases their chance of chronic lung disease. Interestingly, this is the graph from the 1900s of what the percentages of death were back then. Tuberculosis was the number one killer. Pneumonia, diarrhea was number 3, and then 4th was heart disease. Now, here's just a thought about these two graphs when you put them together. Life is supposed to be easier now that we have technology. But what does this graph show you? We seem to be more stressed than ever. Technology can either be our best friend, or what we've done is we've gone from being focused on, one task to trying to put way too much on our plate, do way too much, and then being stressed that we're not going to get it all done. So just kind of keep that in mind. Okay, so stress and the response system. Basically, the one thing I want you to know on this is that word cortisol at the bottom of this slide. So the hypothalamus and pituitary gland also respond to stress. It slows them down. And by triggering outer adrenal glands to secrete, and it's a big long word, glucocorticoids, but really you can just say cortisol. Cortisol is your stress hormone. I don't know if we talked about this in class already or not, but just so you know, there was some research that was done where they had individuals, again, split into 2 random groups. The first group, they had them do their authoritative stance, like they were in charge and they were boss. I call it the Superman or Wonder Woman stance, for 10 minutes. And then they took their cortisol level, which is basically doing a saliva test. They found that when they had the other group, by the way, they had them do a submissive stance, like putting their head on the desk, or just something that was more submissive. They then had them take their cortisol levels. Those who did the authoritative stance, they had lower stress hormones. They also ended up taking more risks. They had them do a risk-taking behavior. They had them gamble. And they found that they took more risks if they had the lower cortisol. So, again, kind of a fun little research. Okay, let's talk about theoretical approaches. The first one is the general adaptation syndrome. It basically, psychologists who research recurring responses to stress call it GAS, general adaptation syndrome. They discovered various chemicals cause stress reaction in animals. So the body's adaptive response to stress was in 3 stages. So those 3 stages were alarm reaction, resistance, and exhaustion. So the first one, alarm reaction. Basically, they found that when the animals got stressed, and we do this now as humans, we've seen this work, that our nervous system is activated in response to a stressor. So once again, I'm going to use the bear as an example, but this could be anything. It could be a high stress day at work, or taking a huge exam that you're supposed to take, or anything that's really a big stressful event in your life. Your nervous system actually gets activated. It's like it sounds the bells. You start releasing chemicals in your body in response to that. So that goes to the next step, resistance. The body responds with physiological reaction to cope with the stressor. It releases these different hormones in order to deal with that. But what we find is after the stressor is gone, like you went and you took your big test, or I want you to think about the day you had to take your driving test. If you've taken that already, were you stressed? Most likely. You're probably pretty nervous. And so after the fact, though, you probably felt, even though if you passed, you're really excited, but you were exhausted. Have you ever had that when you're so stressed about something and then after the stressor's gone, you're like, okay, can I take a nap now? I'm done. And so that is our body. Basically, it's depleted and we have physical deterioration. So what happens, though, again, back to if you have a chronic stressor, then you're feeling exhausted all the time because your body is reacting all the time. And it's just not healthy for us to be in that. Another stress category is biogenic. Biogenic stressors are stimulants. They cause stress by virtue of the biochemical actions they exert on the human body. So examples of that would be coffee, nicotine, amphetamines. Ooh, chocolate. I know I have a friend who loves eating chocolate when she's stressed. It's actually causing her body to experience more stress biogenically. So if you are already going into a stressful situation and you're wanting to chill, maybe not have that second Starbucks for the day. Okay, just saying. Okay, psychosocial stressors is another category. They are a combination of individuals' thought processes as well as social circumstances imposed on him or her. So in other words, like when you have to meet a deadline, or it says being assigned to a new mission. I don't even know what that means, but like being assigned to a new task. My task today, honestly, I had done Zoom before, but I hadn't had to be in charge of it on my end. So just making sure, I was a little stressed about making sure I knew how to do it for you guys, my students. Each person handles stress in different ways, depending again on their perception. Okay, we do have different personality types, and this will be on a test. I know it was already on your quiz. I gave it the answer to you of type H, but you probably are like, what does that mean? I've never heard of type H. Probably have heard of type A and type B though, right? So type A is a term used for competitive, hard driving, impatient, verbally aggressive, and angry prone people. These people are really intense. They're competitive, man. They want to win no matter the cost. And usually how they look at stressors is as being a threat to them. You know what? If you are in their way, they will trample you to get the job done. Type B, they're just the opposite, man. I call them like the hippies. They're easygoing, they're relaxed, like no problem. There's a test, I'll get to it. It's cool. Here's the deal. Type A's are more likely to develop coronary heart disease. This is why you actually see, it's always interesting to me, I'll hear about some like CEO of some big company. Well, they probably were a type A that got themselves to that level, but then they ended up having a major heart attack. And so they now live, because they were CEO of a major company, they now are living in like some resort place out in the middle of nowhere. Maybe their house in Montana or their island over in the Bahamas or something like that. I don't know if type A heart attacks are worth it to have that house in Bermuda, but I probably, because you're not guaranteed you're going to live through the heart attack, I wouldn't chance it. Type H, though, type H stands for hardy. They actually see life stressors as a challenge versus a threat. They still might be competitive, hard driving, They're probably going to be less verbally aggressive and less anger prone, but they still are that go-getter, but instead they don't see it as a threat. They're like, challenge accepted. So here's just kind of an example of type H, of maybe the differences between seeing something as a threat or seeing something as a challenge. So we have this stressful event, right? You're driving to school. In fact, let's say, pretending we had school still, right? You're driving to school or you're driving to work, and all of a sudden you get a flat tire. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, so we have flat tire. The person who sees it as a threat may go, I'm never going to be able to fix this. I'm going to be late. I'm going to lose my job. Life is terrible. We're all going to, die. Well, that would be exhausting to have that panic, right? Versus the person who sees it as a challenge are like, flat tire, I got this. Whether I have my number for AAA to come and fix my tire, or maybe I am skilled at changing tires myself. Little secret, I'm personally not, but I know how to dial AAA. So that's how they appraise the situation. Their response for the threat usually is to panic and freeze up. For those who see it as a challenge, man, it lights their fire. They are focused and they're like, okay, step 1, I do this. Step 2, I do that. I have this niece. She was actually over in the Canary Islands as of 3 days ago. If you don't know where that is, it's just off the coast of Spain. She was studying abroad for the semester. And when this whole coronavirus thing came down, there was a lot of questioning of, because Spain has it pretty bad over there. What was going to happen. And her flight home from the Canary Islands, she went through, I think, 8 different ports or airports. And so she had to fly, and it took her 4 flights just to get out of Spain. She missed one of her flights. They ended up having to spend the night in Madrid, Spain. But it took her forever to get home. But she did not see it as a threat. She has that type H personality, and she was like, we got this. It was kind of funny. She was Instagramming the whole time and having kind of fun with it. Like, how many people are going to be on this flight? She had a couple flights that had only 8 people on it. So she was having a lot of fun with it. Okay. So we do have types of internal conflicts. Again, this is kind of how we choose to look at issues or stressors that come into our lives. The first is approach, that basically we have to make a choice between 2 attractive choices. So, if somebody asks you, hey, where do you want to go for dinner? Do you want to go to, and they pick 2 restaurants that are both your favorites. I'm not going to try to know which ones those would be right now, but which ones do you want to go to? Avoidance is the choice must be made between 2 unattractive choices. So mom goes, hey, what do you want for dinner tonight? Do you want my spinach rice pot, which apparently is nasty? I've never had it, but I've been told it's nasty. Or do you want grilled sauteed liver? And most people don't like liver. If you do, awesome, but most people don't. So again, the choice it's one or the other. You have to choose. Approach avoidance is a choice must be made about whether or not to pursue a single goal that has both attractive and unattractive. So it's multiple approach avoidance. Okay? Okay, let's talk about stress and health. So these are lovely pictures of plaque in your coronary artery right there, and an artery that is clogged. So one thing we know is that stress leads to elevated blood pressure and can result in coronary heart disease, which is clogging of the vessels that nourish your heart muscle. Again, not the best thing. How about pessimism? Again, do you see the glass as half empty, or do you see the glass as half full? If you see it as half empty, then you probably are a pessimist. If you say as half full, you are an optimist. Believe it or not, though, you have a choice on this. You might go naturally to pessimism, but you can change that for yourself. Here's my little practice for you. Instead of only looking at the negative things that happened today, I want you to right now just kind of think, what are 3 good things that happened today? I know somebody who has a really tough time ever doing that, but I know you can, okay? How do we cope with stress? The first strategies for alleviating stress, reducing stress by changing events that cause stress or by changing how we react to stress is called problem-focused coping. Now, we can't always reduce stress by changing the events. I wish I could change the coronavirus. I can't. It's beyond my control, right? Sometimes when we get sick, it's beyond our control. When there's natural disasters, it's beyond our control. But if you know, let's say every time you go hang out with this person, you end up being stressed. Well, that's something you can change. You can say, I don't think if that person causes me stress, then why am I hanging out with that person? By changing how we react to stress, also is the other key to that. So instead of going, I just can't handle it. Okay, but what can I handle? Can I break it into, I tell my kids to break it into bite-sized chunks. Honestly, if we put this humongous, let's say it's Thanksgiving, right? You put a whole Thanksgiving meal in front of you. It looks yummy, but you look at it and go, that's a lot of food. But you know what? If you eat it one bite at a time, we eat an amazingly large amount during that meal, don't we? And so it's learning how to not let it overwhelm you, but how to look at it, piece by piece. When we cannot change a stressful situation and respond by attending to our own emotional needs, it's called emotion-focused coping. Okay, we want to have a sense of control, an optimistic explanatory style, social support. All these things can really help us reduce our stress and improve health. So right now in the middle of all this, I will do my best to offer you guys social support through, through the internet, basically through my announcements, trying to make things as explanatory as I can to you. But there's a part of this that's on you as students. You have to realize, what control do I have over this circumstance? You know, I have control in saying, I need to keep my life a little bit structured maybe. I need to, in the time that I'd be going to class, maybe that's the time I get online and I listen to my lecture and I take my notes. It is that sense of control that you have that can help maintain your stress. Again, that optimistic explanatory style. Instead of seeing it as, it's the end of the world, can you believe it? You know what? It's a great time to catch up on some movies that you haven't watched. It might be a great time to catch up on sleep, take some naps. I know some of you have been working and burning the candle at both ends, and you are exhausted all the time. Take this time to take a nap. Not this time, but later on. I was online listening to a woman who has been in Wuhan. She's English, and she's been there. They were on, when she recorded this, it was on day 48 of lockdown. And she was actually keeping really optimistic. She's like, hey, life is so much simpler. My groceries get brought to me. We borrowed a rowing machine. My husband's lost weight. We are talking more on the phone with our family and friends than we have in months. And she said, and I get a nap every day, and I've read more books than I've read in a couple of years. It's like being on vacation without being on vacation. And so again, how do we look at it? How do we perceive it? The sense of control, again, or influence one has over stressful events in one's life says a lot. So most studies suggest that the lower the perceived control, the larger the potential for health-related problems. The lower perceived control leads to a lower immunity to disease. We have some control issues out there. We want to feel like we have control over our lives and over those stressful events. Again, that explanatory style. People with optimistic explanatory styles tend to have more control over stressors, cope better with stressful events, and have better moods and a stronger immune system. And then lastly, social support. I know right now we are supposed to be staying kind of isolated in our houses. Hopefully you have some good family members or friends at home with you, but this is the blessing of having the internet, of having, our phones. We can literally just reach out and touch somebody through this way, and just being able to find that support with each other. Support of family members, marriage partners, and close friends help people cope with their stress. Their immune function calms the cardiovascular system and lowers blood pressure. Aerobic exercise. Okay, so I watched this great video from Spain. They were not letting this lockdown get in the way of their aerobics. They had this guy out on, like in the middle of this quad area, leading aerobics while everybody did it on their balconies. Now, we don't really have that set up usually here in Modesto because we don't live in a city setting. But you know what? Right now, even though gyms seem like they're a little maybe a germ fest going on over there, so you might want to stay away from the gym. But at home, you can still go out on a walk. You can still go and ride a bike. You can still take care of yourself with aerobic exercise because studies suggest that aerobic exercise can elevate mood and well-being, because it really does. It actually gives you some good endorphins. I call it your natural happy juice, and it helps boost your mood. So that is a good thing. You do not need to know about biofeedback, but it is a way of just making yourself calm down. Relaxation and meditation have similar effects in reducing tension. I'm going to do a whole separate slideshow, or not slideshow, but separate video on doing relaxation exercises, so we'll get to that. And again, modifying your lifestyle. Okay, this is the last thing. Spirituality and faith communities. Believe it or not, regular religious attendance has been a reliable predictor of a longer lifespan with a reduced risk of dying. It doesn't even matter what religion you are in, because what we find is people who usually are in spiritual or faith communities, they kind of have less bad habits. Like a lot of them are more non-smoking. It's kind of frowned upon in a lot of religions to be out gallivanting and getting drunk and all of that, and having multiple sexual partners. And so people end up being a little healthier of a lifestyle. The intervening factors, again, the religious movement or involvement, they have healthier behaviors. They have that social support. It's kind of built into a religious community or a faith community. And they usually have a lot of hope, a lot of optimism. It was kind of interesting, actually. Let me go back. It's kind of interesting that we're going to talk about this when we talk about PTSD, but I'll just mention it now. PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder. They found that survivors of the Holocaust in Germany actually did not suffer from PTSD as much. And that was because they actually held on to their spirituality as a belief that they suffered for a higher calling. They also were in community together the whole time. And so they were able to support each other through the difficult times that they experience. So it's just kind of an interesting part. There is going to be a video. Again, I think I'm going to post that separately because this video is getting a little long, but watch it. It's super interesting. It is a TED Talk. Anyways, hey, stay well, be wise, and I'll see you next week.